I'm going to unpause the recording. So, just know that you're being recorded now. Let's see, share screen. And I'm going to go ahead and share my Rhino window. Oh, actually, can you guys see my entire window? Let's see, here's Canvas. Can you guys see Canvas now? Hopefully I just shared my desktop. Okay, so with module 2, I fleshed that out now with the actual information. I just wanted to double check that some of these numbers in here would actually be feasible for you guys, keeping in mind that there's 30 plus of you, and so I want to make sure that we don't bite off more than we can chew as a collective group. Some of you that said are probably you've already know Revit, or you already know Rhino, or you already know Illustrator, those sorts of things. If you feel like this is really boring, then work ahead, and that's absolutely fine by me. I'm not going to penalize you for doing more, or for doing things faster than the others. If that happens from time to time, there's enough of us here that some folks this really clicks really quickly for them, and others not so much. So what I ask is that you try your best and that you communicate with me if you do need additional help. Learning objectives, we're going to talk about moving fluidly back and forth between Rhino and Revit this time. So we'll take our Rhino model from project 1, we'll throw it into Revit, we'll do some stuff with it, then we'll bring it back into Rhino and do some more stuff with it. We'll talk about wall types in Revit, we'll make some custom things in Revit, we'll change some parameters in Revit, we'll utilize a lot of the basics in Revit, really just the real basics. When it comes to sort of taking these kind of dumb generic extrusions that we made in Rhino and turning some of them into assemblies with actual building components. And so what you'll find is that, the strength of Rhino is being able to model a bunch of non-standard things really quickly, like these walls that we made with, these sort of strange shapes. But the strength of Revit is that you can begin to apply information to all of these things really quickly, right? And so sort of thinking about how these two tools are complementary to each other, and how you can work back and forth between them, I think is going to be the most helpful for most of you anyway. Okay, and then at the end we'll generate a quick isometric drawing again, and so that way we're sort of tracking the lineage of your project as we move through the 5-week semester. Week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. We'll always have this sort of, isometric as these things sort of modify and change. We'll move on from isometric to the next step as well, and the next week, the next module. So we won't always just be producing isometrics, but we'll be talking about plan, section, elevation, that sort of stuff, and perspective. We'll go over the initial parts of the project too. Yeah. So that's what we did on Tuesday. I went over this briefly and quickly, part of it, last time we met yesterday. Today, what we're going to do is I'll go through the workflow, hopefully in its entirety, but at least most of it. If we need to do more workflow demonstration tomorrow, then we can. But we'll also have time at the end, again, for virtual help sessions and work time, both today and tomorrow, with the idea that then project 2 is due by Tuesday. Again, you'll just continue to develop this in Revit, bring it back into Rhino, clean a few more things up, and then produce another isometric drawing. A PDF of your isometric drawing will be due on Tuesday. So 28th. Okay. Really, where the rubber meets the road is the project workflow here this time around. I've tried to sort of provide an outline of the general points here, the general steps. And so this will be our outline for today as I start to demonstrate these things over Rhino and Revit for you, okay? So the first step is we're gonna look at that Rhino model that you made an isometric of before, and we're going to move it over to center it up so we're in the Cartesian coordinate space and around the 0, 0, 0 point. That way, when we export it or we import it into Revit, it'll show up sort of centered in the Revit screen too, which is kind of important. We're going to basically do some layer management. So we're going to look at, let's say, the horizontal parts that you made and put those on a layer. We'll look at all the vertical parts that you made and we'll put those on a different layer. Okay. Again, something that we went over yesterday, but I'll do again today. We'll actually add a few more planar surfaces that we won't actually, we won't extrude these or offset them or anything to give them thickness. But these will be at least 4 planar surfaces that we'll assign as glazed curtain wall later in the assignment. then we'll go through and just audit the file, make sure that we don't have anything extra that we don't want to see in Revit. You know, all those old curves and unused pieces if you have them. The make 2D stuff, we can save a version of this file out if we need to, if you don't want to delete all that stuff away forever. But you can, but what we want to do is just clean everything up. So we just have basically just the surface information, extrusions and things like that, that we want to bring back and forth and continue to develop in Revit, okay? So that's where we're going for step one. All right, now here's Rhino. Here's the model I ended with project one with. Okay, so a couple of things here. One is I'm going to start to make some new layers. Okay, so I have my layers panel up on the right-hand side. You don't see that for some reason. Again, you can toggle that on. It's this silly like pie-looking thing that's separated into a red layer, a white layer, and a blue layer. Okay, so you can toggle your layers panel on and off there. Okay. Typically, it's docked over here on the right, and you'll see several tabs. One of them is layers. All right. And so hopefully you've been good about doing that in project one. If not, now's the time to start. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this vertical extrusions. Okay. So what I did is I just create a new layer with this button, and let me name it. If I want to change the name, I can always just click on the name and let it sort of the cursor pop up. And I could change the name if I need to, right? Vertical extrusions. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around my model and try to select all of the sort of vertical walls or extrusions that I made in project one. Okay. And I don't know if I'm selecting all of them yet. If not, I'm pretty close. But at a certain point, I'm going to go to the properties tab over here. You see on the right-hand side where this is docked? You need to get used to going back and forth between properties and layers. So properties, this will display the properties of all the things that I have selected. And so one of those properties is the layer that they're on. Right now, they're just all in the same generic model layer. I'm going to pull that pull down menu, and it's going to give me an option for all the layers that I have in my model currently. And I'm going to pick vertical extrusions. So now all of those selected walls are going to be on the vertical extrusions layer. If I turn that layer off by turning the light bulb on or off, right? And you'll see they'll disappear. And that'll just leave me with the horizontal extrusions, which is perfect because that's the next step. I'm gonna make a new layer and I'm gonna call this one, surprise, horizontal extrusions. Okay. And now I can just click and drag and select all of these at once, go to the properties box and set them all to be on the horizontal extrusions layer. Okay, there we are. There are the verticals, there are the horizontals. I can put them all back together if I want. So I'm turning both layers on at the same time. Okay. Let me just quickly pull this over to the side here so I can toggle back and forth between screens. I want to make sure we adhere to this outline so that, you know, when you're going through this, and then later on when you need to replay the YouTube model, or the YouTube video, that these things sort of really align, right? So we separated our horizontal slabs, right? The sort of floor slabs, the floors, and then the vertical walls on different layers, right? Verticals and horizontals. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select everything, my entire model here. And if I haven't already, I'm just going to move this. I'm going to snap to like one of these bottom corners and use the move command, point to move from. I'm going to go ahead and snap there. Okay, now it's going to ask me for the point to move to. I'm going to type in 0, 0, 0 into the command line. I'm going to move that over now to the 0, 0, 0 point, right? And some of you might still have this grid on, and so you'll see that also in your screen, which is perfectly fine, okay? But that's what I did. I basically just moved this over so it's centered up in the world Cartesian space. What's important about that is that now that we have the 0, 0, 0 point, when we import it into Revit, it'll also import at that sort of 0, 0, 0 point in Revit. So it'll be centered up in our site plan view and in our 3D views. That'll just be really handy. It won't be off to the side somewhere, sort of off in space in some sort of weird willy-nilly position, but we'll have it nice and centered, okay? All right. The next step is we're going to create a new layer called glass, and we're going to model at least 4 planar surfaces. This is something that I did yesterday, but let's just explain it a little better today. I'm going to use a couple of different surfacing methods in order to create some planar surfaces. I'm not going to extrude them into a thickened solid this time. I'm just going to leave them as paper thin planes, okay? And we're going to do different things with those in Revit as opposed to some of the thickened volumes that we made, okay? So I have this glazing layer from the last demonstration I did. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that since you don't need that. And I'll just go ahead and do this again from scratch. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this glass or glazing, right? Glazing and glass usually all refer in architecture to windows and curtain walls, you know, looking at glass basically. So I'm just going to make sure also that glass, this new layer, is checkmarked. I'm going to click where that checkmark column is. That's going to make this the active layer. So now when we start to make new objects, like let's say I start to make surfaces, they're going to be on this glass layer automatically. I don't have to select them afterwards and change their properties again, okay? Okay, so there's a couple of ways we can begin to think about surfacing that will help with this, okay? One way is, first of all, I'm going to pull out all my surface creation tools here. Okay? Again, if you look at the toolbar, we make points. We can use points to make curves. We use curves to make surfaces, and then there's how to make all the surfaces. I click and hold, and a whole bunch of surface creation tools pop out, and I can pull those over. Let's take a look at these really quickly. I can create a surface by sort of snapping and defining some vertices, like 3 or 4 of them, in order to make a triangulated surface or a quad-shaped surface. I can fill in planar surfaces, or sorry, planar curves with a surface. I can, you know, start to fill in between edge curves. I can extrude, which is something that we did before, right? All I need is a curve or a profile or a shape, and then a direction, and it'll extrude the shape or the curve in that direction. So I'm going to use extrude again. And this time, I'm just going to use some of these surface edges that I have in a few places here. I'm just going to move around the model and find a good place here. So let's say I'm going to make a curtain wall surface that's going to extend from here on down to the ground, like this top edge. Again, I'm not really worried about making inside versus outside or making rooms or anything like that. This is, again, just a sort of spatial folly. You know, I'm not going to talk about design. There's just not enough time. This isn't Design Studio. This is just, let's learn the tools so you can absorb them in your design studios, right? So one of the things I could do is actually use these edges from these surfaces that already exist and extrude those. So I'm going to go ahead and hit extrude, just like we did before. You could type in extrude if you need to. I'm just going to select these edges and hit enter. I'm just going to extrude this down. And if I turn on my object snaps, then it'll ask me the distance that I want to extrude. And you can see maybe in this right view, right? I'm just sort of seeing how far this is going. I can snap to something in the plane that I want, along that XY plane, and then click. All right, now it's sort of snapped all the way down there. Okay. All right. I made 2 extrusions. I'm just gonna, it's kind of weird that, you know, because this was a line segment, this was a line segment, they were 2 separate line segments. I'm gonna go ahead and just delete that little one. I don't want that one. Okay. Another thing I'm gonna do, because, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, how these things really kind of typically work in real life. You thought about this as being a sort of rough opening that someone would actually frame curtain wall or storefront or window into. What we'd probably want to do is move this over and inset it in a little bit into the thickness, maybe at the midpoint here, inside the wall. So I'm just going to type in move, and I've selected this surface. I'm just going to say zoom in. I'm going to move from where it is here on the flush with the outside face of the surface. I'm just going to snap it to the mid point of that wall. So it's just sort of inset. Okay, that's typically how things work, right? If you look at your windows in your house or any kind of curtain wall with mullions. All right. I think yesterday we also did something out here as well, right? So I did this funny corner condition and pulled those down. So I'll go ahead and do that right now as well. Go ahead and extrude, type in extrude curve. There we are. Once you start typing in extrude and you've used extrude a couple of times, it'll it'll automatically guess that you're typing an extrude, and you can just hit enter without having to type the whole thing in all at once. Which, again, it sort of builds in the IntelliSense shortcuts for you, and sort of learns from your workflow. Okay, so you can see I'm going to go ahead and extrude these in the Z direction. And I'm going to extrude them down, and then the distance, I'm just going to try to snap to something again in the plane, on the XY plane. All right. And I'll leave that for now. Sure, why not? So that's 1, 2, 3 new surfaces that I've made just to use for the glass or the curtain wall. And so I need one more because I need at least 4 planar surfaces, right? So I'll just do one more. Again, I think yesterday I mentioned I have this funny situation out here where this is just sort of cantilevering out. It's not really supported. Maybe I sort of think about curtain wall with reinforcing a reinforced tube or something behind it. And so it looks like a sort of bearing wall then that sort of holds this up. So let me just draw a line that I can then extrude. Just gonna snap here. And I know that my curtain wall is going to be in 4-foot modules. So I'm going to pick a multiple of 4. Let's go with like maybe 20 feet. Okay, I have my ortho toggled on so I can just draw 90-degree increments. That's really important. Okay, now I have a line out here in space. It sort of starts at this corner and moves that way. And I can go ahead and extrude this down as well. I'll go ahead and try to snap to something in that XY plane. Yeah, there we are. Kind of a weird, funky thing, but whatever. Maybe I want to move this. I'm going to move it 4 feet over. That way the mullions have a shot at lining up with this wall when I, since they're spaced 4 feet on center. 4 feet. Oops. Move. I think I typed 44. There we go. Perfection. Okay. All right, so now I've completed this step, create a new layer called glass, and I modeled these 4 planar surfaces, right, that we're going to use later in Revit for one sort of material system. I want to make sure that I've deleted any extra geometries and layers in Rhino model that I won't need. Okay, let's just talk about that for just a moment. One thing I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to save. That's always important. Save early, save often, right? But one of the things that you might have left over from your previous project in this file are like the make 2D stuff and all that sort of things. If you need to select a layer, right, and just delete it, you can just select it and then hit the X. Okay. If there's stuff inside of it already, then it'll ask you like, are you sure you want to delete this? And you can just say yes, right? Also, you might have some curves and lines and things that you've drawn, right? And they might not be on a layer that you're deleting. We don't need those anymore. One quick way to delete curves and lines all at once, so you can just delete them and not accidentally delete any of your surfaces or anything like that, right, is you can type in this command. It's called SEL, short for select, so cell, and then CRV for curve, okay? So there's lots of different geometry types in Rhino, but if you type in cell, SEL, and then let's say surf, SRF, to select all surfaces, or polysurf, to select all polysurfaces, curve, CRV, will select all lines and curves in our drawing. It looks like there's that line that we drew originally. I'm going to go ahead and just, now that's selected, just delete it. Okay? So now I have just the information that I need to continue to develop in Revit. Let me go ahead and save again. Okay, and this is just some housekeeping. It's just like after a while, sometimes you make copies of things. You start to accumulate a bunch of stuff that was process based, and then at a certain point, maybe you don't need it anymore. And in fact, it starts to get in the way, and it's sort of, not only unnecessary, but unwanted. So feel free to sort of purge it out and clean up your file. Again, just sort of a housekeeping thing. Let's see here. This isn't the best model. I saw a lot of good models last night and this morning when I was reviewing the submissions. So you guys are doing a good job. I like the isometrics I saw. They're pretty cool. So, okay, I think we've basically satisfied step 1, all right? So without any further ado, let's go ahead and do step 2. We can try to address any big questions here at the end. But for now, I just want to get through this so we have recording so that, you know, if you need to go back and rewatch something, you can, okay? So step 2, import your Rhino file into Revit. So I'm going to go ahead and close Rhino for the time being. I've made sure I saved everything. I have my vertical walls, my horizontal floor slabs, and my glass, all on different layers, which is perfect. Close that out. No, I'm not going to install an update. That'd be the worst timing ever. I'm going to go ahead and open up Revit. We're going to create a new project in Revit, and then we're going to import that Rhino file in, okay? This goes through a little bit of that routine, right? We're going to go to the component tool and do the model in place. We're going to import CAD option, you know, and basically import our Rhino model as a generic model. We'll make sure to hit finish and then go to the 3D view, which will show us an isometric view of our model. And all right, so let's go ahead and execute that. Waiting for this to open up. You guys all have the student version, it's free. And it only lasts for about 12 months, but you know what? In 12 months, a new version will come out, and you can, again, if you still have a working .edu address, you can go ahead and re-license whichever version of Revit you want, and just continue to use it for free as long as you're a student. So I'm just going to say for models, new, okay. And I'm just going to use the default Imperial construction template, create new project. I'm just going to leave that all the way it is and hit OK. Okay. So this will start a new working file for us in Revit. I think hopefully by default this this architecture tab is selected. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to go to the component, and we're going to hit that little arrow to give us the options under component. You can place a component if you have one. But we're going to do model in place. This will open up some options for us. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to give it a family category, right? So we're going to say, okay, this is just going to be a generic model. We don't really have a category for a surface model from a different software. So we're just going to use generic model. That seems to work really well. Let me hit OK. I'll name it. I'll just leave it as generic models. It doesn't really matter what you name it, at least for our purposes in this class. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And so now it's going to give us some modeling tools. So we could actually do some extruding and revolving and sweeping if you really wanted to try to draw these things in Revit. It's a little more painful in Revit than it is in Rhino. That's why I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, to be honest. So instead, the create, I'm going to go to the Insert tab. Insert tab, I'm going to find Import CAD. And I'm going to import this, Rhino file. So I'm going to go to where it's saved, go to my AAD 267 summer 2020 folder or whatever. And I'm going to make sure that right now, by default, it's going to look for a DWG file. I'm going to tell it to look for a Rhino file. And today's the 21st, and it looks like I was just messing around with, or no, it's the 22nd. Bringing into Revit at 11:22. Yeah, this is the model I was just working on. So I'm going ahead and pull that in, okay. It's probably by default already in, let's see, a level 1 floor plan or the site plan. You know, it doesn't matter either way. What I want to do is just go down here to 3D. I'm going to go to the 3D view, okay. That way I can sort of see things in isometric. It's a little more understandable for me. And you're going to have to bear with me with my mouse. My mouse is not the ideal mouse to use in some of these softwares. I need to just invest in a mouse, a better mouse, but you know, in my free time. So a couple of things, right? Now that I have this inside of Revit and it looks correct, I'm gonna go ahead and click this green check mark that says finish model, right? So now I'm done, you know, doing the placing the component, right? So once we did that, you know, it wanted us to model or import something and then tell it when we're done, okay? Let me just double check our workflow, make sure we're hitting everything in the right order, right? Yep, generic model, insert, that should say insert, not inset, my bad, and then click finish model. Okay, we're on the 3D view, perfect. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do, we'll start with making a 4x4 curtain wall system, okay? All right, so again, I'm in the architecture tab. Here's how we can start to think about architectural components: railing, walls, windows, doors. we have a set of surface faces that we made, and I'm going to use those to make curtain wall systems. So if you look at the curtain system, right, I'm going to go ahead and just click that really quickly. And then over here in the properties tab, it's going to give me the default curtain system. It's a 5 foot by 10 foot system. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and click where it says curtain system here. Okay. It doesn't have any other options. So I'm going to make my own option. We're going to name that option 4x4, and we're going to give it some new parameters, right? So it's not going to be 5 feet by 10 feet. It's going to be 4 feet by 4 feet, etc. So now I'm going to say edit type. Okay. So it's where my cursor is located. Okay. It'll bring up a box. I don't want to change the 5 foot by 10 foot defaults. What I want to do is make a duplicate of that. Okay, so I want to make a new one called 4 feet. I'll just change the name here. 4 feet, add the little tick mark for feet, hit OK. Okay, so now I'm making a new type in the curtain wall family. And so I'm going to adjust these. First of all, what's 10 feet and 5 feet, I'm now going to make 4 feet. Okay. For fixed distance, I'm going to say maximum spacing. And then for a curtain panel, I'm going to say system panel glazed. I'm going to say grid 1 continuous. I don't need a border. And down here for mullions, I'm just going to say rectangular mullion for all of these. This seems to work okay for our purposes, right? You know, the interesting thing is that, you know, if you go to certain manufacturers of curtain walls, you can actually download pre-made curtain wall families and things like that from the manufacturer, from Suites catalog. But we just want to I just want to show you how to do this, and this is good practice for you. So I'm just going through and adjusting these parameters. I'm done adjusting, I think, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And again, we said, okay, we wanted to make a curtain wall system, and it says, okay, well, you need to select a surface or multiple surfaces. Let me go ahead and select that one. And I'll just go ahead and then once I've selected one of these surfaces, I'm going to go ahead and say create system. Okay, and it's going to go ahead and instantiate the system along that surface. So that's just surface is now populated with a curtain wall. Okay, you can see it has mullions, face on the inside and the outside. They're a certain size. They should be 4 feet on center, both vertically and horizontally. And you know, that's just going to look really sweet. You know, I don't know how practical that is. You know, for instance, it would leave us a roof opening for, let's say, a door system of 4 feet by 8 feet. Yeah, you know, but that's a little chintzy. You know, sometimes that's why they have side lights and top lights and things like that around doors to sort of fill in the spaces and gaps that you would have otherwise. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Shift button and use my right mouse button and sort of turn my view a little bit. And zoom in where I want here. Come on now. There we are. Find a couple more of these. There's another one I need to apply curtain wall to, and then these vertical ones over here. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, it already has the select more, so I'm just going to go ahead and select these. Make sure I'm selecting the right ones. They'll highlight, and then, you know, they'll highlight blue once you've selected them. Go ahead and hit create system there as well. Okay. All right, look at that. I love it when a plan comes together. You know, there are other ways of thinking about, you know, for instance, if you're trying to fit a 4 foot by 4 foot grid in something that isn't exactly 4 feet in height or multiple 4 feet in height, you can try to set like how you would think about where that pattern stops and ends. So do you want the strange irregularly shaped pieces to be at the very top, or do you want the grid to be centered and things like that? You can talk about justification and center things up, or actually have it justified to one edge or the bottom or whatever. Okay. So there are more parameters as you know, let's say I wanted to select this and change some of these things, but I'm just gonna leave it as is, okay? All right, so that's step 3. What I did is we made a new curtain wall type from the curtain wall family. We made it this size. We adjusted a few more parameters, and we applied it to those 4 surfaces that I made this morning in Rhino, okay? Now, step 4, what we're going to do is we're going to take at least 3 of the, at least 3 of your vertical extrusions, right? The thickened extrusions, right? those thickened vertical extrusions from Rhino. We're going to turn them into a certain wall type that we can then begin to add the wall reveals to, all right, to sort of simulate an aluminum cladding in a more of an abstract, generic way, right? So this doesn't actually a cladding system. What I want to do is show the reveals, right? So the idea is that we're going to pick 3 of these surfaces in order to do that, to sort of define a wall type and then begin to add the reveals. The other surfaces that are untouched, those will be concrete, all right? So we'll think about aluminum cladding, curtain wall glazing, and then concrete as a sort of composition, okay? We're not going to add any reveals to floors, right? So we're only going to do it to vertical surfaces in our vertical, in 3 of our vertical extrusions or walls, right? These should be 2 feet by 2 feet, just the sort of grid that's formed with these reveals, okay? So let's go ahead and start that. Okay, so again, I'm going to go to my architecture tab, and I'm going to go to wall. Now let's say wall architectural. And so it's going to give me what it wants to give me to start off with, a basic wall that's generic, a basic generic wall that's 8 inches thick, okay? And if I go to this pull down, right, you can see that there's actually more options here in some of the wall families that it's loading. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pick generic 6 inch, okay? So basic wall, generic 6 inch. Let me go back to architecture, and I'm going to go to wall. I'm going to say assign wall by face. So what we're going to do is we're going to start selecting the vertical faces of this extrusion that we brought in from Rhino, right? And so each of these walls are going to be 6 inches. And so it just basically wraps around itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically start to put reveals on the sides, side edges, the front edges, the back edges, okay? So I'll do it for that one. I went around and got all the vertical faces for that. Let me hold down the shift key and let's move around. I'm going to do this maybe, maybe I'll do it for this one as well. So I'll go ahead and select the vertical faces for this one. Just want to be careful and make sure you're selecting the right faces here. That one. Come on. I don't want to have to keep panning or keep, I'll just have to, I guess. Oh, sorry, I zoomed in way too much. That's unfortunate. Let me zoom out. Just want to get a little closer here. Make sure I'm getting the right edge. Of course, this is the hardest thing in the universe to do. Maybe I need to go into the inside again. There we go. That's all I wanted. Okay. Then I selected that one a second time by accident. I'll go ahead and X out that error message it just gave me. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do that for 3 of these. I've done it for 1 and 2, and maybe I'll just pick a 3rd one somewhere else. I want to make sure that they're sort of distributed throughout the composition. I want to make sure I can see them, of course, as well. But maybe I'll do this one. So I'll do this edge, and then the end edge over here. Oh, come on. There we go. Perfect. Maybe perfect. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I'll go ahead and get the cursor so I don't accidentally select anything else. Any other faces I don't want to make into walls. 6 inch generic walls. All right, so now that these are defined as walls, I can then begin to place the reveals. Again, let me just double check. Right, it's really easy to forget something here. 4 by 4, yeah. So 6 inch generic walls, yep. Now I'm going to do the wall reveals. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Like I said, there's more than one way to do this. I'm going to go ahead and start with this, this wall. I'll go ahead and go to the wall tool again and pick reveal. And I'll go ahead and make sure it's set to horizontal. Now, like I said before, yesterday when we did this, the default reveal profile right, is really kind of oversized for what I want. Okay. So I'm actually, before I put in any reveals, I'm going to go to the file, pull down, and I'm going to go to new, and I'm going to go to family. I'm going to create a new family. So I went to the file, pull down, new, and looked at the options for new, waited for that to pull out, and then select family. That'll bring up a box where I can say, first of all, okay, I'm going to look through all the file structure for all the families in the English Imperial directory, and I'm going to go down and find profiles. Okay, so I'm going to make a new profile type. Okay, and so let me see here. Now I can draw a new profile. So I'm going to say line and draw a rectangle here. I went to line option, then it brought up a set of options. What do you want to do? I'm going to specify a rectangle. I'm going to let it click to that intersection point, and then I'm going to move my cursor until I've gotten a 1 inch by 1 inch rectangle and click. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and load this into the project. All right. Now, it has me at level 1. I'm just going to go back to 3D. There we go. See how all the different views we've set up are still here. So if I want to go back and change this profile, I can. It's right here. I'm just going to go back to my 3D view of the overall model. And now I'm going to go back to wall, reveal. Okay. For reveal, I'm going to edit type. And for the profile, I'm going to pick, instead of the default profile, I'm going to pick this new profile I made called family 1. Hit OK. Now I have a much smaller reveal. It's 1 inch. Okay. Let me just try to zoom in. Okay. Again, there's different ways you can do this. You can make a reveal and then copy it down. There's ways to, make it go around. You can hit the restart reveal, right? You can do this in 3D view. You could also, this is, if I, let's say I just want to set all of these in this elevation, I could go to the right elevation. And then as I start to place these, it starts to give me the dimensions that I think are actually a little easier to see. So let's see, architecture, wall, reveal. All right, let's see. Not sure why it's not giving me the right options here. Reveal, there we go. Place reveal, there we go, restart, and on. Like I said, you can use copy tools, there's mirroring tools, there's rotating tools, and there's offsetting tools. So you just want to be careful when you're using those. I'm gonna go ahead and select these and start to understand maybe a little better like where these are actually located. So this is, I want to say maybe 1 foot away from the top edge. Since this wall isn't a perfect 2 feet by 2 foot module. So then I'll make this 3 feet away. I'll keep going from there. And like I said, there's more than one way to do this, right? So I'll make this 7 feet and on and on and on, just sort of. Okay. For some reason, this didn't extend all the way to the end. I'll make sure that it does. And I'll just finish this out really quickly. So I have a few of these. This will take a little bit of time, and you need to be careful doing it. So that's why we're only going to do 3, okay? Let me go ahead and just going to drag this back out to just slowly adjust it. Yeah, okay. So go back to the reveal. I just want to sort of reveal the adjacent faces so I can start to continue these reveals around. Reveals in the round here. And go back here and sort of rotate this around a bit and do the same thing over here. Restart reveal, and it'll try to match things up for you. Make sure you're snapping in the right place so they actually do continue around. Nothing worse than your reveals not lining up, right? I'll rotate this around to the very edge here. So I'll just go around and finish this one out. Okay. Notice when I do a reveal each time, I can toggle back and forth between horizontal or vertical. So I'm just trying to take care of all the horizontals at the moment. Again, I can go to my cursor and select one of these at any time and basically ask it, like, why the crap is it not? Yeah, there we go. Going all the way out to the edges. Not sure if that's just the way it's drawing on my screen or if that's just a weird Revit thing or if it's a user error, which is more likely than not. Okay, if I want to continue making the reveals, I want to make the vertical reveals, I can just toggle to vertical and I can start to do that here as well, right? So, rather than eyeballing this, maybe then I start to, I'll just quickly draw these for the sake of the demonstration. Ta-da! And so that's how reveals work, more or less, right? In the most basic, primitive way possible. There are ways to shortcut this, like I said, with some of these tools. And if you want to experiment with those, then that's fine. But I do want to make sure that you're sort of able to select these things, begin to understand, okay, so this was 3 feet out, so that's no good. All right, let's make that starting at 2 feet from the edge there, right? And then begin to adjust these things accordingly. This is really important. This is the kind of stuff that you would have traditionally drawn 20 years ago. Now you enter these in with a couple of numbers and parameters, right? So starting to make this sort of square grid. Okay, then to continue onwards. All right. So I would do that for not only these walls, but then this wall and then the third wall, right? Go around and do that, right? In fact, I did that in the example here. You can see this wall is 1, this wall is 1, there's one back here. I have some curtain wall added, right? Once you've done all of that, the next step is simply to save. And I recommend saving a Revit file. So I'll call this project 2 demonstration or something like that. I'll just do that for now, okay? That way, if I need to go into Revit and adjust anything I can open up that Revit file again, all right? But in the meantime, I also need to make a file that I can bring back into Rhino, okay? And so in order to do that, I'm gonna go to File, and I'm gonna say Export, and I'm gonna go to CAD Formats, and I'm gonna pick DWG. I'll hold my cursor there for a minute. That's the File pull down, Export, a set of options comes out to the right, CAD Formats, set of options comes out to the right again. There's a lot of options nested within options, and DWG. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and click DWG now. And before I hit next or set, save and close, I'm gonna go to this ... that's gonna give me the export options and setups. And I'm gonna click that, and it's gonna bring up a box with some options. I'm not gonna change anything here except in the solids tab. And so I'm gonna tell it to export solids as, not as a polymesh, but as basically an SAT or an ACIS solid, right? So in other words, these are gonna come back out as extruded solids that will be poly surfaces back in Rhino. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK once I've changed that setting, and then hit next. Now it's gonna go ahead and export this file as a DWG format with that setting. So I'm gonna go ahead and change the file name to something that I'll remember, like Wednesday 267 export to Rhino or something like that, just for my memory. Okay, make sure it's in the right directory and hit OK. All right. And that'll give us a new file with a .dwg extension that we can import directly into Rhino. All right. And so that way we take all of the reveals, all the curtain wall systems back into Rhino for some quick rendering and some Make 2D magic. All right. I can go ahead at this point. I'm just going to save one more time and then close Revit. Sure, I'll just click yes. Save. Yes, replace, sure. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino and import that file in. Sometime today, hopefully. There we are. So I'll wait for the splash screen to go away and for Rhino to open up. Okay, for new file in Rhino, I'm just going to make sure that large objects are selected. Now we're working in feet. Okay, so go ahead and open that template. Okay, so I have a brand new Rhino file. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and go File. I think it's Import. Yeah, Import. There's a number of files we can file types we can import. I mean, just about everything imaginable here. So I'm going to try to find that DWG that we just made in the desktop. AAD 267 summer. Icons. Let me change this to details and then sort it out by the date that yeah, there we go. So there's Wednesday 267 export to Rhino, the thing that we just made 2 minutes ago. Yeah, okay, there we go. I'm just going to leave this the same. Model, feet, layout, sure, inches, whatever, I don't care. But as long as it says feet and that we have this, this Rhino file as feet, we're good. Go ahead and hit OK. And bring this in. Okay. So now there's our new Revit file now brought back into Rhino. Okay. There's a couple of things here, right? It brought these elevation markers and tags in with this. I'm going to select those and just delete them because I don't want them. And interestingly, it brought in some new layers for us, right? So this was the old, back in the days of AutoCAD, the old AIA recommended naming conventions. So the architectural components started with A, there were engineering components started with E and civil, C and all that stuff. But we have like floors and glazing curtain wall and walls and things like that, okay? So it's actually remembered some of these things on different layers, and that's why things are different colors, right? So for instance, the glazing curtain wall, the curtain wall system, the mullions are yellow. I could always change that if I really hate that color. Let's make something just a little brighter and more contrasty. There we are. There's the actual glazing. Interestingly, it actually remembered the original solids that we used, that we put reveals in, right? So we have the solids that we used before, the extrusions, and the walls, and the reveals. So I'm just going to try to select the generic model from before, right? Now you can see that all of the Rhino, the original Rhino geometry that we brought in, all those extrusions, are all grouped together. They're one block instance. And I'm going to just go ahead and type in explode in order to explode that block back into, you know, there's an extrusion, there's an extrusion, there's its own extrusion, right? Now, this extrusion is redundant. I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. So that way we get to see just the stuff here, the reveals and things like that we made, okay? And so you'll need to do that. For the extrusions that we actually put reveals in, you'll need to go back through and delete the original extrusions. Otherwise, you won't see the reveals because when we look at this, they'll be hidden inside of the actual original extrusions, right? So, okay. And so now that we have this, we're ready to make it into isometric, do a make 2D and things like that, okay? I'm more inclined to maybe pause for a moment and like get a drink of water, let everybody stretch, and then I'll do that part, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen for a moment. I'm gonna go ahead and pause here, so that kicks back up. Okay, so break time's over. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Desktop 2, share. All right, there we are. And so what we're gonna do is, again, talk about how to, now that we have our Revit model back into Rhino, set it to a 30-30 isometric, do the make 2D with scene silhouette and all the requisite detail. We're gonna have to go through and edit some line work. You know, it seems like no matter what, I'm always missing at least one line somewhere. And so I just want to look at that carefully because I'm anal, and that's, you know, if that's our craft, right? I mean, that's our disciplines: architecture, landscape architecture, interior architecture. That's what we do. It's our craft. We don't make buildings; we make drawings of you know, of buildings and in the built environment. So, you know, if no one else is going to fix our drawings for us, right? So, you know, we should take real pride and care in sort of crafting every drawing that we produce. So just giving this a little bit of TLC, I call auditing the drawing. We'll go through and probably delete some few things. We might have to add a few things here and there carefully, and that's not going to be too big of a deal, but just one of those things where it's just like, you know, adding the human touch to these things can make a big difference sometimes. Technology can be fallible, so making sure that your best critical eye is on these drawings to make sure that it looks right. Like I said, what I saw before was really good. We'll bring him to Illustrator, and then we'll bring the line work into Illustrator, adjust line weights and line colors again. Like I said, the new wrinkle is that will also generate a quick, really quick white clay model rendering, just to add some of the tone, soft shadows here. We're not going to turn on the sun. We'll just turn on daylight or skylight. And that way we don't have any crisp shadows, but we have like the sort of tone. And we can even underlay that then in Photoshop when we composite with the line work. And we can even adjust the opacity of it to just make it, you know, a very subtle thing. Okay, so that's a new wrinkle I'm adding into the step 7. You know, it's the difference, I guess, between project 1 and project 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Here's Rhino. And first of all, I want to go to my viewport label. I'm just gonna like turn this to shaded so I can see it a little better. Shaded or maybe rendered, I don't care. Yeah, shaded looks better. And I'm gonna go to set view, isometric, and I'm just gonna pick, I can't remember which view I picked before, but I'll just pick one now. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. That one's kind of lame. Also lame. No, that one's not so bad. I'll just pick this one. I mean, why not? This is just for demonstration, so I'm not going to be that picky. All right. So again, a couple of things. A few of you, not most of you, but just a few of you. I noticed you somehow messed up your isometric. It looked like this, or it wasn't a 30-30. Always go back and make sure that this thing is set to that 30-30 orientation, right? I can right click with my mouse and rotate my view around anytime I want, right? But when it comes time to do the make 2D, I want to make sure that it's very precise, right? The whole point of an isometric drawing is that everything is to scale, everything is parallel, and that everything adheres to either the vertical or 30 degrees in one direction or 30 degrees in the other direction. That's the standard. And so, you know, we're going to just follow the protocols here. So now I'm ready to do a make 2D. I'm just going to type in make 2D. I'm just going to select everything. I'm just going to drag a selection box around everything all at once and hit enter. It's going to give me some settings, right? I'm going to leave this by default. So parallel, that's the current setting. That's what we're going to draw. Yeah, so I'll make sure tangent edges are on just in case. I don't think that should be a big deal. But scene silhouette and viewport rectangle. This takes to make sure that viewport rectangle is turned on. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. I turned off hidden lines because those are just too many lines. I don't want to deal with hidden lines. They're not something I'm going to turn on in my drawing. So there's no point in having that information. It's just sort of noise, visual noise. And I'm going to go to the top view. This new drawing is still selected, so I'm just going to click move or type in move and then just move it off to the side so it's not overlapping this information, the model information. Okay. And so now I'm ready to export this to Illustrator. Now, while I'm here and I have this and I haven't moved this at all, the parallel view, let's talk about making a quick white clay rendering of the model. So by default, right, we have, sorry, along the right-hand side here, I have properties as a tab. I have layers as a tab. Hopefully you also have render settings as a tab and the materials as a tab, right? Little paint palette or a little paint tube of paint as an icon, materials. Currently, I have no materials in the model, which is good because I don't really want to mess around with shaders right now. That's a different conversation for a different time. But what I'm going to do is just let it go to its default white plaster, white clay shader that these are already set to. And I'm going to go to Render Settings, the Render Settings tab. I'm going to say Current Viewport. And okay, so it's right now the size of the rendering will be the current viewport, right? DPI 72. I'll just leave it at 72 for right now in draft quality. I don't want to take too much time. What I would do is once you know this is going to work, I set this to good quality so that it's less grainy. And what I'm going to do is make sure that skylight is on, checked on, but sun is turned off. So I'm just going to make sure skylight is turned on, sun is turned off. And last, I'm just going to turn on transparent background and turn off ground plane. Okay, so here are my settings. I went through, I made sure that this is set to viewport as the size. So that way it renders out the edge of the viewport. That way my rendering will be the exact same size, the JPEG or PNG that I produce will be the exact same size as the viewport rectangle in my drawing. And that way it's really easy to make those things line up. The underlay rendering and the overlay of line work will match up perfectly. DPI, I'm just going to leave at 72 for right now, just for demonstration. I do recommend maybe once you've done this once and you make sure everything looks okay, that you do it again at good quality and maybe up the DPI a little bit. But I don't want this to last too long. I have transparent background checked. I want to make sure I uncheck ground plane. And I have sun unchecked, and I want to make sure I have skylight checked. Okay. And once I have all that stuff, I'm just going to go down to the bottom and click the render button. And a render box will pop up, a render window will pop up to actually generate the rendering. Hopefully this doesn't take too long, since I mean, it shouldn't. It's like the simplest model ever, but. Like I said, all we're doing is just trying to generate something with a little bit of the tone, just to make the drawing pop a little bit. We're not going for any kind of realistic rendering or anything at this point, of course, right? And we're not adding any textures or mappings. So you can see what I'm talking about now. Draft quality, where it gets dark, just like if you're taking a photograph without enough light, it starts to look really kind of grainy, right? You start to get some of that noise. And so once I did this and made sure that all the components were there, what I would probably do is close this and then up it to good quality and then redo it. Okay, just hit the render button again. So that's how you do the rendering. It'll pop back up. So once this is done, the save image icon will be available to click, and I'm going to go ahead and save this image. I can save it as a JPEG or a TIFF or anything else. Since I have a transparent background, I'm going to preserve the alpha channels, the transparent background to it. I have to pick a PNG file. So I'm going to go ahead and pick PNG. I'm going to go ahead and save this on the Mac side since my Adobe suite is on the Mac OS. So file name, I'll call this rendered underlay Wednesday, something like that. And I've made sure that I've changed the file type to PNG. I'll go ahead and hit save, okay? So that's going to save this as a PNG image file, okay? I can go ahead and close it now. So last but not least, I have this drawing and it's in top view. I need to go ahead and export this out as an Illustrator file. A couple of things though. First, what did I forget to do? I forgot to do the intersect command. And so places where things intersect through weren't drawn, of course, right? There's always something. So I'm gonna go back to parallel view. I'm gonna go ahead and run the intersect tool. This might take a minute or so. Intersect, there's a lot of objects to intersect here. So go ahead and just do that. And it'll produce those lines and curves and things like that that just aren't drawn. I'm sure you noticed that in Revit and Rhino, they don't draw every minute detail unless you have the settings cranked up, in which case it starts to take more memory. So, all right, now I'm going to redo the Make 2D, okay? Let me go back to my top view. I'm just going to go ahead and select this old Make 2D drawing and delete it. Go back to Parallel and Make 2D. Run that command again, select everything, hit enter when I'm done. Double check my properties, tangent, scene, silhouette, viewport rectangle, okay. Watch it work. Now I'm gonna go back to top view. It's laid out this flat drawing on the XY plane for me. I'm gonna go ahead and double check a few things. Just take a look. Let's see. Looks like I'm missing a few lines right here. Looks like I have some extra edges and things like that that I'm gonna delete away here in a bit. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and export this in Illustrator, or export this as an Illustrator file. So File, Export selected. Change the file type to .ai for Illustrator. Again, I'll call this line work overlay Wednesday or something like that. I'll even try to spell some of it correctly. Here we are. Alrighty. I'm just gonna leave this as default and hit OK. All right. Obviously, I didn't finish my reveals. Bad, Professor Josh, you lazy dude. All right. And I'm just gonna go ahead and minimize windows. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up Illustrator. Just wait a second for that to open up. Okay. So we have everything exported out of Rhino that we can bring into Illustrator and start compositing and formatting as a drawing. Just waiting for Illustrator to open up. Feels like half my life is wasted away just waiting for apps to open and close my laptop, it seems like these days, but whatever. All right, so open, and I'm gonna open up that AI file that I made. So it's over here on my desktop. Line work overlay Wednesday. Okay, that's the one I just exported out. I'm gonna open that up in Illustrator. All right, couple of things. Again, one of the things I want to do in Illustrator is double check my document size. So I'm going to go to Document Setup, Edit Artboards. It's going to select the one artboard that I have. Up here, I can adjust its width and height. So I'm going to say 17 by 11 portrait, or sorry, in landscape format. Okay. Go ahead and take this drawing. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to give it a width and a height. So I'm going to say, okay, first of all, if I change the width, I want the height to be linked to it proportionally, so it'll adjust automatically. I'm going to tell it to make the width 17 inches up here, so the height adjusts along with it. I can also tell it that I want the top left-hand corner to be at the 0, 0 point of the drawing, so 0, that top left corner, and 0, 0 on X, 0 on Y. All right. And once again, all of those layers that I had in Rhino for the drawing, the Make 2D layers, those have been carried over into Illustrator for us. Okay. While I'm in layers, I'm going to go ahead and select one and then make a new one. I'm going to call this rendered underlay or something like that, right? This is where we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to put it at the very bottom, and we're going to place that PNG file that we made, that image file. File pull down, place. I'm going to place that PNG file here as well. And I need to tell Illustrator to make this 17 inches wide. And of course, it's going to be the same height. Okay, so then put it at the 0, 0 point. And now it lines up precisely. Yay. Okay, and so now I'm just going to lock it into place. And I'm going to turn off the viewport rectangle. I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to take the visible curves, and I'm just going to select those, and I'm going to turn those to black lines. And I'm going to change the stroke weight to something like 0.25, something like that. Okay. I'll do the same with the scene silhouette curves. You know, it's up to you what you do here. So not only am I going to change the line weight, the stroke weight, I'm going to change their color again to black. That would help. Okay, now you can see when I go through this and I start to zoom in that there's edges here that I don't want. For instance, in Revit, I took this mass, right? And I turned it into a wall and a wall and a wall and a wall. I don't want to see those outlines of the walls. I'm just going to go ahead and delete those away. Just sort of selectively delete edges that I don't want. And then, you know, over here, I've noticed that I'm missing a little bit of information. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. Oops. Sorry. You get used to one tool and then you have to use the other here. Okay. Right, so I can take this line, I can actually use this cursor and just select one of the endpoints of the line and just make sure it snaps precisely. I can just find this point and move it to there. I can draw a new line and go from here all the way to there, right? Just a couple places it seems like it really has problems. That's not quite parallel. I'm really anal about this. So you know what I'm gonna do? That line should be parallel to this line. So I'm just gonna make a copy of this and paste it and then just move it over in place. Now it's perfect. Now I'll just do this and shorten it up. Make sure I snap it to that intersection. Drawing in Illustrator is not the funnest thing, but there are ways of doing it so you're not like, you don't feel like you're, let me put it this way, so you don't feel so frustrated that you want to throw your laptop through the window, which happens occasionally. Okay, so I'm just going through and auditing some things, you know, again, just sort of, you know, making the drawing from really good to really perfect, right? That edge, I don't think you'd see that edge. Same with the curtain walls. This is just too much line information. Let's just make this look like one solid mullion. I don't want to see all the edges. The way these are modeled sometimes in Revit, you just have some extra stuff, which comes in handy when you're detailing, but not when you're making an isometric for the purposes of making a lovely drawing. Okay, so I'm just going through and selecting things I don't want, making sure that it's just the things I don't want. Oops, hitting undo, right? Control Z if I accidentally move something I don't want to. I'm clicking here and I say, oh, actually that's not just its own little individual line segment, it's just the continuation of this edge that I want to keep. So I'm just going to move that edge up. Just going to move this edge away. Right? Sometimes it's like that. So you just want to double check and zoom in and again, just, you know, take some time and care with it, you know. This is the last step, so just making sure everything's perfect, right? Okay. 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. So it's work. You got to go in and zoom in, and you know you don't just uncritically take what the computer spits out at you, but you know this is on you to make a really lovely drawing, right? That's perfect. So there's a couple of places, you know, where you're going to have to go through and clean some things up, or remove some things, or adjust some line weights maybe a little differently. This is the edge of the wall, so I don't want these to show. I'm just going to zoom in a little closer so I can understand what I'm looking at here. Control plus to zoom in, Control minus to zoom out, Control 0 to fit to screen. And if you want to pan, just hold down the space bar and then you can just use your mouse to pan. So get used to using your left hand with your keyboard and your right hand with your mouse. All right, no. So this is how I would do this stuff. So I wanted to demonstrate all of this so you guys can get started, because tomorrow, you know, I can clarify anything. We can just make it a big work day where I can troubleshoot and help you answer any questions, that kind of stuff, right? So that's the name of the game today, was trying to get everything, the whole workflow sort of done in person in front of you, but also recorded. So as soon as we're done here, the video will start to process, and then I can upload it to YouTube when it's done, and link things in for you on the modules page. And so that way, you know, between in-person help and then the video documentation, you should be able to work your way through project 2 tomorrow and then onwards through the weekend, okay? Of course, once I'm done, I can save this as a PDF if I want, right? Oh, I see a couple more lines. This is a quick fix, right? I don't want that edge, right? This is cast in place concrete slab and cast in place concrete wall. Then, you know, we're not going to see a bunch of edges and things like that there. That's just weird. Let's get rid of that edge and that edge and that one. Just move that back. Just cleaning things up. Oh, see, I wanted that edge, but not, I didn't want it to go all the way here. Interesting. I'll just zoom in on that a little closer. Make sure I'm really going. Yeah, okay, there we go. Okay, so don't be afraid to just zoom in and zoom out to make this thing really work. Here's a situation where if I delete this away, I'm going to delete the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll just draw a new line. Just make sure I have Smart Track on so I can snap. I can click and snap, unclick. And I can click and hold Shift, so I'm just moving up and then snap to there. Right. That's an edge I don't want to see. Right, I'm just going to keep going. Look, I'm missing this edge. So again, just go through this and take some time to really go through it thoroughly. You'll notice that not everything is perfect. All right, I'm going to just take this point. I want to snap it up to here. Okay. Go through and give this drawing the love it deserves here. You can be Bob Ross, happy little mullion. Give this window a friend, or whatever you want to say. All right, replace. Save as an Illustrator file, so that way I can always open it back up and adjust things. But I can save as a PDF, save as, and then upload that PDF when I'm ready before the end of Tuesday, next Tuesday, okay? All right, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording and stop the screen sharing. But that brings us to step-by-step here. So what I'm gonna try to do is then time code this recording according to steps and then some of the bullet points. That way, if you go through and you have this as your checklist, and you're following through maybe with the video if you need to, then you can sort of, all those things sort of line up, which will be, I think, hopefully helpful for you. Again, you know, I can only do so much, you know, but the idea really with the crash course that's this short and with so many tools is just to sort of whet your appetite and try to demystify some of the interface for you. And so hopefully after that, your intellectual curiosity kicks in and you just keep going and going and going. The other thing is to develop a sort of literacy with these tools so that, you know, as they adjust and evolve, you can evolve with them and continue to learn because you've learned how to learn these things, right? Or how to work your way around a new interface, okay? So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing, I'm gonna stop recording,